Hello, LinkedIn friends and healthcare consultants. I'm so happy you were able to join me today for another conversation with an amazing leader here at the Network Podcast for Healthcare Professionals. I have with me today Cheryl Parks, who is an amazing sales strategist, leader, and coach. And I really wanted to introduce Cheryl to my audience simply because we have so much in common when it comes to sales strategies and being able to authentically show up as ourselves as leaders. And I love the fact that she encourages her students to use her heart method, in which you don't have to sell to corporate and be salesy or spammy. And I think as healthcare leaders transitioning into healthcare business consulting, Cheryl, a lot of people feel like they sound salesy. And so excited to connect with you. I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience of amazing healthcare leaders.
Absolutely. I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Elle. And I love, first of all, you'll understand why I have an affinity toward healthcare professionals as we get into the conversation. But to introduce myself, so I am Cheryl Parks. I'm also known as a sales growth coach, and I work with sales focused leaders so that they can come to sales conversations confidently to actually increase their revenue and their time to revenue, but also in their own authentic and natural voice so that they don't feel salesy or scripted or spammy, as you mentioned, and they can feel like they are their authentic selves. Now is 100% the time for that. And we're going to talk about why.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. You know, just out of personal experience, Cheryl, there was a difference in my sales conversion in the corporate world when I stopped following the script of others. And I said, you know what? I'm going to lean into what feels good. And also, I'm going to lean into how would I like to be approached? And that was a game changer. So I am so ready to start the conversation. But first, you know, when you say confidence, how can we tap into our confidence if we are fairly new to the sales process?
That's a great question. So first and foremost, you really want to take an inventory of what you are confident about. And then typically when we're not confident, we get a physiological response. Some people get sweaty palms. Some people get this turtleneck thing because they get stress in their neck. Some people get headaches. For me, it was the knot in the pit of my stomach. And so take an inventory around what you are confident about, and then pay attention to the signs that demonstrate that maybe I'm not as confident here. Basically, it shows up as stressors. Okay. So when you feel like you're in a stressful area and something begins to show up, it's really good to just take note of that and begin to start kind of understanding the way I did it. I'll just get straight to it. The way I did it was I would just tell kind of myself, my other self, that nervous self, like, hey, it's okay, I got this. Because our brains and our human nature is to look for things that where we're in danger. So when your body is showing up and it feels like it's in danger, right? Just because you're going to go on stage, you're going to go do a LinkedIn Live, you'll want to tell that part of your brain, it's okay, I'm not in danger, I got it, right? Speaking to yourself, that positive self-talk, and I know we share that as well. You always positive self-talk, and then focusing in so that you can begin to walk your way out of that lack of confidence. There's some other areas that we'll talk about, but that would be the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that because I believe even before, like when I would connect with leaders, before discovery calls, or even just having one-on-one Zooms, those feelings would come up. But just saying, I got this. I like that.
Yeah. we have to tell ourselves what we're going to do and that it's okay, because we want to maintain that level of protection for ourselves. If you're walking out into the street and a car's coming, we don't want to completely eliminate it, but there are some things that don't deserve that power, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. We jumped right into confidence, Cheryl, but I did not highlight the fact that another reason why we are so much aligned, alongside of the fact that we follow some of the same strategies, but your mother was also a nurse. So,
Yes.
and then I saw that you've done work with Kaiser Permanente as well.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll give you the short version of the long story. My mother was a registered nurse for 50 years. She only retired maybe about 10 or 12 years ago, but she literally served, I say served in the NICU. She served in the emergency room. She served in mental health. She also served in assisted living and memory care. And I just checked this with her this morning.
Yes,
So I grew up under just the service of my mom showing up and serving in emergent situations, as well as, longer term situations with mental health. And then, of course, situations in memory care and assisted living, which gave me a really broad cross section of what she was doing. I didn't realize at the time how important it would be, but I always, this is a big nugget. So as I look at the way I sell, sales has a significant amount of diagnosis in it. And I always tell healthcare professionals, you are the ideal audience for sales, because that is part of who you are, is the diagnosis, right? The
yes,
facts, just the facts, ma'am, right? Like, let's just get down to what is really happening and where we can start to apply things that would support someone being in a better situation.
yes,
The transition from pain to desired outcome. That's sales. It's also healthcare, right? When
yes.
it's done, yeah, when sales is done well, that's what it is. When healthcare is done well, that's what it is.
Yes, and I like how you simplified that process, because sales is not foreign. It's something that we do every single day. Um,
Every day.
and tying that to the diagnosis, absolutely, it makes sense, because when we go on to sales calls, like your discovery calls, it's all about pulling out all the pains, right?
Right, right.
So here's
Yes.
something interesting, Cheryl. Your mother actually worked for a lot of the type of facilities that our
Mhm.
healthcare consultants are
Yeah.
targeting.
Oh, I
So
love it.
yes, yes. So I would love to talk a little bit about the process of, okay, we know we have to show up with confidence,
Mhm.
and we've already identified that, okay, sales isn't new to us. We do this all the time.
Right.
But how would that healthcare business consultant start the sales process? What does that look like?
So one of the key areas, and one thing that can provide is there's a cheat sheet that I have for how to get prepared for sales meetings, specifically business to business sales meetings. And I'm happy to provide that to anyone that has interest. But preparation would be key, right? So understanding who we're talking to, what the mission and values are of the organization we're speaking to, because when you're going in there, I used to tell people all the time, I can speak about what I do for hours upon hours. But literally, if I understand more about what they do, then I can answer a question specifically related to what they have interest in. And that's key. So that would be one. I would definitely say preparation. The other thing that I say is practice. I know people don't like to practice, they don't like to role play. I would ask questions of somebody, and this doesn't mean family and friends that don't really know what you're doing, because they tend to say, that sounds great. But I mean, ask questions of someone that actually can take on the role of a corporate buyer, so that you're getting in the habit of asking good questions and follow-up questions. And
Mhm.
then finally, one of the key questions, I'm going to give three questions here. I love to give like things they can implement right away.
Let's
So I'm going to give you
take notes.
three
Take
tidbits. Yeah,
notes.
three little nuggets. You can always ask, what prompted the call if they called you, right? That will open up the conversation. What prompted the call, or what prompted you to accept the meeting, right? Then you'll understand where they see the value. And then one of the other questions I would ask right now in this age with a quote unquote looming recession would be, how do you see the next 12 months playing out? And where do you see some of the business impact coming from, right? Where do you see impact to your current situation, whether it be pain or just current status quo, what you're doing, right? That would be a second question that I would ask. And then a final question, and this is going to let you know which road you're going to travel with your prospect, with your buyer. I would ask them, what has surprised you, if anything, about your current evaluation? And the reason you're asking that is because in this day and time, buyers are super savvy. They have more than likely researched their problem and their options before we got into the room, into the Zoom call. And so if they don't have anything that surprised them, that lets you know that maybe they haven't done any of the work, or maybe they just are like, yeah, I knew this is what it was going to be.
Yeah.
But typically they're going to come in and say, gosh, we didn't know A, B, C, and D, and we thought this, and that took us down another path, kind of like a Google search, and it takes people down different paths. If you start to understand what surprised them, then you can support their decision making. That's what sales is about, is helping your buyer make their best decision.
Yes.
It's somewhere along the lines, it gets tripped up and it becomes about salespeople making commission and being in President's Club and all kinds of stuff. But that's not what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. There's someone who appreciates the question. They asked, what was number 3 again? I think, Cheryl, you mentioned what has surprised you about your current, say that one more time.
What has surprised you about your current evaluation? So it's about 90% that you get engaged with someone and they're already down the path of researching their problems, researching what some of the options are. If they aren't, that lets you know that they're probably going to need a little more education, right? If they are, that means that you might be able to say, okay, there's probably a time frame here, right? So as part of one of the frameworks that I teach from, we talk about timing, timelines, and triggers, okay? So if there's a timeline there, then we start to know that, right? We start to know that they have a back end focus on getting something in place.
Yeah, those are all good. In fact, those are all excellent. And one thing I also ask Cheryl is, I always ask them, what have they done in the past and what hasn't worked? So do you think that's a good idea, Cheryl? And I want your feedback because I need to look, we can always improve and expand.
Yes.
I like to dig deep into the pain, so they know exactly what it may feel like to not move forward with working together. And I feel like that's being authentically me. I want to be able to share with you what could happen if we don't work together.
Yes, yes. And what we're specifically talking about is shaking the status quo, right? So if we don't get someone to understand the pain, and I'm going to go back to the healthcare scenario, right? There are a lot of times that healthcare professionals are prescribing things that may be, and I've had someone say this, it's 5 very large pills you have to take 3 times a day, right? And then they'll go back and they'll say, if you don't take these, this is what it could mean. And if you do, this is the path you'll be on, right? So to help people understand that, we need to understand exactly what the pain is and how deep it is and how important it is. What's the timing of it? How committed are they to resolving the pain, right? Because if they're not committed to resolving the pain, that could be something like, I'd rather just take a vitamin for this, or I'd rather, longer term, I'll come back next year and check it. We've all heard these things, right? I'll come back next year. So I think your question is an absolute great one. The other thing that can be asked, similar to the question that you just pointed out, is what did you do in this day and age? What did you do prior to the pandemic to resolve this, right? Because a lot of times that'll give you insight to some of the things they did before and how things have changed based on the landscape that we're in now.
Yeah. And we all know, post-pandemic things are drastically different. I think there's a lot of opportunity that has opened up for us as healthcare business consultants. Cheryl, to add, I tell my students, think about how you can help them save FTEs and money. So what can you outsource? So normally, we go in and we share recommendations, but how can I save you time and money? And so that's like post-pandemic, being able to highlight those things are important. I'm happy that we're having conversations about discovery calls, because I feel as though a lot of my students particularly need to be supported with those discovery calls, um,
Mhm.
and showing up confidently through doing research. Check, they've done the research, they're ready, they know the pains, and sometimes this just comes with experience. Is there anything that you do, particularly Cheryl, in your sales call to make sure that they are successful? And what does a
Yes.
successful sales call actually sound like? Because
So
I'm sorry, Cheryl, just quick iteration. I know I used to not know exactly what to do. I said, you know what, I'm going to get on these calls. But what I had to tweak was owning the call, Cheryl, because what I found was I used to allow the decision maker to take over, and it turned into an interview style.
yes,
So I would love
100%.
to dive into that conversation.
Yes. Okay. So I heard the question as what happens during the call. A lot of it has to do with how you prepare for the call. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to swim upstream a little and go back to that.
Okay.
So again, research, right? I always check my energy level, right? So before I get on a call, before I go into a meeting, I just want to check my energy level. How do I want to come across? And I start to visualize, how do I want to come across? Am I, is it multiple people on the call or in the room? Is it one-on-one? Do I want it to be more formal, less formal? What have I learned about their particular organization? Like, as you mentioned, I work with Kaiser Permanente. I also work with Blue Shield of California. Those are two totally different organizations in terms of the way they buy and they make decisions. So as you start to understand that, you'll start to kind of get a sense of like, I want to show up authentically as myself. I'm going to come in and I'm actually going to breathe and just ask good, solid, illuminating questions, as is said by one of the LinkedIn experts out there, Josh Braun. Good, illuminating questions. I want to be sure that I ask follow-up questions. Here's a really good one. If I don't understand something, and I don't think healthcare professionals are, I don't think this is the nemesis. If I don't understand something, I will pause and ask them, can you explain that to me? Because I don't understand. Or could you provide context for me? Because your buyer, they want you to know as much about them as you can, so that you can help them make a better decision or their best decision. So I would say those are a few things. Being prepared with questions. I think if I didn't hear you say the word winging it or the term winging it, Elle, that's what I heard in my head. Okay.
You
So
don't
a lot
want
of
to do it.
you don't want to wing it. You want to go in understanding your key questions. I would not have probably more than 5 to 6 of them for a first call. That's actually a lot. It'd be 3 solid to really understand, the landscape of the problem they're having, and always be asking about the desired outcome. Someone said to me last week, no one pays money to stay in the same place they're in right now. Right. So we always want to be looking at not only the outcome, but the impact of the outcome. So you help them save money. What does that do for the organization? You help them reduce headcount and or repurpose talent. What does that do for the organization, right? Does it free things up? Does it help with customer or patient experience? All of those things. So you want to get to the end. You want to take it to outcome and the impact of the outcome and let them talk to you about that.
I like that. So a lot of open-ended questions is what it sounds like. And I'm so happy that you mentioned kind of limiting the questions to a few. And just to let everyone know, this may take multiple calls. There may be multiple discovery calls that you have to conduct. And I've been there. Something I've learned along the way too is always get a date in which you're going to follow up, because for a fact that we're busy, and then when you have leaders who are running organizations, they're extremely busy also. So I appreciate your insight about discovery calls and mastering that. Do you talk about money on your sales calls at all? Like, how do you introduce the price tag?
Yeah, so I don't run from any price tag, but at the same time, before I start talking about any type of price tag or investment, which is always the phrase that I'm using, I want to make sure I have a clear understanding, and I'm going to do a formal proposal. So, that's when the pricing, the investment actually is revealed. But if someone was really pushing me for it, in my head, I'm always thinking to myself, is this a 3-figure? Is it a 4-figure investment? Is it a 5-figure investment? Most of the time, buyers don't want to know to the penny what it is. They just want to know that we're in a meeting. I control budget for up to, let's just say $10,000. Is this beyond the budget I control and I need to pull someone else in? Or is this something I'm going to be able to sign off on? Typically, that's what they're trying to figure out. So if someone's pressing you for it, you can give them just a range or that type of thing. Yeah, just to be sure that we're all in the right room. Who wants to spend meeting after meeting and a length of time going on a path and involving other people to find out that there's no way we could invest in this? It's well beyond. Now, you may have those moments and you can create and advise them on the return on the investment. But at the end of the day, if someone's pushing you, you can give them a sense of what that looks like.
Absolutely. I appreciate you so much, Cheryl. That's such great information. I want to get into your heart method, especially for those who are not quite sure exactly how to move forth as their authentic self. I know exactly how I like to be approached. And I find that oftentimes, I find this so strange that most people who've gone through sales programs or they've hired those to help them, they still, their outreach, it does seem spammy. So, I had to really take token of what don't I like to receive. I hate receiving information when it's all about that person, or they don't ask the right questions, or they just send paragraphs and information that I didn't request at all. And so I said no. And just like I reached out to you, Cheryl, I do that all the time. And I found Cheryl here on LinkedIn. I was completely impressed with her. And so I think I sent you a voice message.
You did. And yes. And may I add that Elle completely practices exactly what she's talking about, what she's training on. She's the embodiment of her brand because I didn't get the message was specifically for me. I could tell she had done the research. I knew she knew who I was, and she asked permission. So I'm going to take the inverse of what you just said, right? So you said, they send me things that I didn't ask for. So we always want to ask for permission before we pass things along, whether it be insightful articles, introductions to people, etc. You also said this paragraph upon paragraph of text. I call that the wall of text, right? You look at it and you go, our human brains are like, I have to hurry up and I need to find some words that are meaningful. And if I can't, I move along. So we want to be real concise and direct ask in this time frame, in this day and age. And then the other thing that you mentioned was something that I call, and I heard it on LinkedIn the other day, the I ratio. So always be counting the I's in your messaging. When people see I sometimes read messages that have I like 9 times. Our eyes immediately go to I. Probably because we're all me-centric and I'm thinking I is me, but your I is you. So you want to create your message so that it doesn't show up with all of these I's, which immediately the human brain kind of goes, that's not for me. It's not for me because the person's talking about themselves. So those are all key areas. Everything you said is a way to really focus.
Yeah. And I think, you know what? I have been implementing all those things without doing all of the research, but that's just how I like to be courted.
Yes.
I'm going to be courted. Courted in sales. And it is a form of courting. You really have to think about, like in a relationship, how do I desire to be treated and courted? And I do those same things in business and it works well, but I want to learn about your heart method because I feel like a lot of that is in alignment with how we both move in business.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to give you, there are several parts of the acronym HEART, HEART, but we're going to go over just like the first layer. So H is human to human. I'll just talk all about that, right? Show up as your human self. Buyers know when we're being kind of like not ourselves and somebody's pressing you to make a call or some such and that kind of thing. Buyers, they feel it, right? It's sometimes called commission breath. They can kind of feel like there's a commission desire or a revenue desire, right? Okay, the second part is the E, which there are several to this particular one, but I'm going to say, let's see, edutain is the word that I use, right? So when Elle's message came to me, I happened to remember you mentioned something about, I just woke up this morning and I decided I'm going for it. I wanted to see if you might want to connect. And I was like, well, of course. Who wouldn't want to connect with like excitement and sunshine and all the things, right? And then you gave me another line or two, and I was like, yeah, I'm in. You had me at I'm going for it, because that's what we do. We go for it. Okay. So the A then is action. One of the words associated with the A is action. What actions are you going to take, right? So there's your primary action, but then a lot of times, the world isn't perfect and people don't just immediately say, oh, I'm so glad you showed up in my inbox. Yeah, let's connect. So you may have to follow up. What does the follow-up look like? So part of action is the main entree, so to speak, and then what follows, right? What follows the main entree, and then the R is results. So we always want to be looking for outcomes, right? And there are a couple of other R letters that go with that. And then I already gave you the T. That was the nugget: was timing, timeline, and triggers. Yeah. Those three things, and that's the whole gamut for T. It's really important to know if your buyer has a trigger and like the house is on fire, right? Is their pain emergent, right? For what we're talking about? Or did you just call at the right time? Oh my gosh, you know what? I don't have anything on my agenda for that. I'm not in pain, but I was just thinking we should look at that. You've heard people say that. Mm-hmm. And then timeline that's when they say that's actually on our timeline for Q3. So now it's a matter of you designing your efforts to help support them gathering information when they get to Q3, and now they're ready to do their formal evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so amazing. First of all, so the H, human to human, I feel like now more than ever with social media, we can lose human to human connections. Yes. Even though we're seeing people all the time, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're engaging with those people. Right. So that right there alone is a huge nugget. So you really have to think about how are you going to show up even more human in your sales conversations. Now, Cheryl, quick question. Now, I approached you in a certain way. I do this all the time. Would you suggest, or would you have me modify anything in that process when it comes to corporate buyers?
Candidly, no. Especially today, I think corporate buyers are looking for a refreshing way of approaching the market. Corporate buyers are ripe for someone to come in as their authentic selves. And even if you trip over something, which you did not, if you trip over something, you can actually go back and go, oh my gosh, did I really say that? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a pause and a contraction, because they understand the human side of it. Like, as you mentioned, we're all in a different space now. I wouldn't change anything. And candidly, the clear indicator of whether or not you should change something is if you're not achieving your next step. So clearly you're achieving the next steps. If you're not achieving the next steps, then yes, you want to look at messaging, who you're messaging out to, and you want to start to really, this is all a test. You really want to start to understand, am I achieving the goal that I have in place to get in front of and or have conversations with X number of people?
Yes, absolutely. And all of that goes back to looking at your KPIs. I'm a little crazy with the Cheryl. I have a whole tracker. I know how many people I reach out to. Like, I have to be able to evaluate if it's working, if it's not working. So all those things are extremely important to the process of sales. Cheryl, you share so much information and you validated a lot of what I do. And so I appreciate you so much. Yes. There have been conversations where I have hit some roadblocks, and I know many people have also. When you get on the phone with the buyer or you're having a conversation and you feel resistance or you meet some resistance, and a lot of that is some objections. How do you specifically deal with objections in sales conversations? I think that's something we could all benefit from learning a little bit more about.
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is literally, I mean, if I've won X number of times, that means I've failed probably 10 times more than that.
Mm.
So there are a few things. First and foremost, as you mentioned, it's being in the game. Like you actually have to be in the pool to get wet and to learn to swim. So you have to be having conversations. You have to start taking notes of what's going well, what's not going well. But while you're in the moment, let's talk about that because that's uncomfortable. And I can tell you from not only my own experience, but from just observation, high performance, high achievers, people that are used to being looked at as experts, it's very challenging to become the student again.
Mhm.
So I'm going to repeat that again because we are students and leaders in the same moment when you're in sales. And when we high achievers, high performers, and anyone that's viewed as an expert in their craft has to become a student. Our traditional style of learning says students aren't deserving yet, right? But in sales, being a student is just, I mean, that's where the bread and butter lies. That's where the sweet spot is.
Mhm.
So when you're in the room and you have an objection, I would say first and foremost, breathe, okay, and don't immediately respond. That's typically what happens and why salespeople haven't been regarded as being super, like let's call the salesperson, right? Super
Mhm.
approachable. So you want to breathe and take a moment, and then you might ask them to, can you help me understand your question a little better? And I'll give you a good example. People will say, oh, the investment price is way too high. And in asking them, kind of pulling the layers of the onion back a little bit, I'll ask them, okay, can we talk a little bit about that? Is it the upfront investment? Is it the recurring investment, or is it the overall? And all of a sudden, I've heard several times, oh yeah, it's the upfront investment. We could probably only do 10%. You're requiring 20% down. Okay, if I could do 10% at the end of the month and 20% 15 days later, would that help? Oh, yeah, that's great. That's what we're looking for. All of a sudden, the idea that they said it was too much has now been broken into pieces, right? And so you want to just understand exactly what part is deemed too expensive.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And it's all about asking the right questions. When
yeah,
you dig deeper and ask questions, it will reveal so much. And I love that. Cheryl, I'm taking that and I'm going to implement
yes,
because what I normally do, Cheryl, in full transparency, like my people know, I practice what I preach. I'm a
yes,
transparent book. But I normally, they ask for the price and I don't give specifics, but I'll give a ballpark range. And I
mhm,
normally will go high before I go low because I know
yes,
I can like not so much decrease the value of what I'm offering, but I can take some things away.
great,
So I
100%.
normally have just been saying, okay, well, what is the priority and just taking some things away. But now that I know, okay, ask a question in regards to price.
Mhm.
What is the bottleneck or what is the issue behind that? I'm going to
Yeah,
implement that because
yeah.
now we can just work out a payment plan.
Yes, you may even find the person says, "I can only sign for up to $50,000." And I wasn't trying to go to my senior vice president to have them get involved in the process. So now you're like, "Oh, okay, if I were to able," so you start to ask about their process, right? What does that look like? And to your point, what can we take away and bring back to the table in a further period of time? But the more you ask good questions, the more you'll really understand what the issues are at hand. And sometimes, and I'm going to give this to, this is a nugget. So years ago, when I first started in sales, we were tasked with writing down the long list of objections. The price is too high. We don't need that solution. Let's see. We don't have the right decision makers in the room. Like I can't decide. So you go through the list, and I think I'd gotten to maybe 24. Candidly, those objections have not changed. So if you're fearful of what the objection could be, write out your list and start to look at it and start to understand, okay, why would the buyer say it's too expensive? Let me think this through. It could be the upfront, it could be the recurring, it could also be the overall, the accumulative, right? So at least now you're prepared with that. You're like, okay, I understand it could be one of three or four things. But it's when we go in and we have no sense of what the objections could be, and we don't have a sense of what questions could I ask? And then that's when we start to get nervous and everything just starts to hurt.
Yes, like you said, you can't just wing this. It
You
requires
can't.
research and practice. And
Yes.
you know something else? I'm just sharing all the things that I do, Cheryl, and I'm okay with that. But
Yes.
I like to have, even before I go on to sales calls, I like to feel good. So I'll do a good workout in the day and I'll put on some good music to pump me up before my call. So, all those things help me with my confidence.
I love it. I'm going to tell you, if you go to my Instagram right now, you will see me doing the dance party before this podcast. You'll recognize this blouse. So it's a matter of really getting yourself to the most confident space. I'll give another couple of key points. So I grew up as the shyest girl in the room, literally moving from New York to California, and then realized that I was average shy in New York. And when I got to California, I went underground. Like so shy, I wouldn't even ring the bell on the bus to get off the bus. I would just keep riding and get off with the next person. Like that's how shy I was. And so at some point, after going to school, and I was a never married single mom, which has a different stigma attached to it, and all of the things, I made a decision. I'm like, something has to change. You're not going to accomplish your goals if you don't show up for yourself. And so I created mantras. One of my first mantras was be your excellent best. I'm kind of back to that one now. Act like the person you want to be was another one. The value lies in the difference. Act like the person you want to be was excellent, because I started to visualize myself 3 years from that point, and I would walk the walk of the person I wanted to be. So self-talk, positive self-talk will really help. Record it on your mic, on your phone. Play it for yourself in the morning. You could play affirmations. You can play your own positive self-talk. When things hit you, objections, you didn't do well in the meeting, instead of going inside yourself, spread and get air, water, sunshine, music, whatever it is that inspires you. Take a walk and really just allow yourself to kind of push those things out and just stay inspired. Stay in spaces where you can be inspired, because that's typically what buyers want. They want to know, like, how can this be better? What could you do for us? I'm in pain. I need it fixed. Right. So those are some of the things I did to march myself out of shy girl. I still have my shy moments where I walk around the block when all the neighbors are outside or whatever. But for the most part, I can tell the shy girl to like sit in this seat right here, because I have some stuff I need to go do.
Yeah, absolutely. Dealing, or not even dealing with, but addressing and being aware of how mindset and how you feel and think, like all of this ties into sales.
Yes.
I know for a fact that I would not invest in someone who, if we got on the phone and they seem hesitant or unsure or didn't show up, with a certain power about themselves, I most likely wouldn't invest, because I would be a little bit, I would start to question, could they get the results from me? So,
Absolutely.
And Cheryl, something else we have in common, I absolutely believe in stepping into the vision of you, who you see yourself in the future. And so that's something that you should do even before those sales calls. So I appreciate you sharing that. I do the same thing too.
Yeah, that's life skill, right? I mean, you've got to see it before you can be it. But at the end of the day, I think it's just really imperative to understand that there are so many people out here, and there are so many options to solve problems for people. Just know that if you have a solution, it's our obligation to at least have the conversation with someone where you can resolve something or solve a problem for them. And so I would say that's number one. The other piece is that you really want to be sure that you're doing what's best for you. So maybe music is our thing, right? We're talking about listening to certain types of music, but at the same time, it could be that maybe quiet is your thing. Maybe you just need to be quiet, and meditation, yoga. So just understand what inspires you to be your excellent best in the moment you need to be it. Once you find that, you just keep doing it over and over, because that's where the real you lies. That's your superpower.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I'm happy that you shared that information. Cheryl, I know that you train sales teams and also
Mhm.
individuals. I want to learn a little bit about your program. And while Cheryl shares that information with us, if anyone has questions, we can take about one or two questions from those who are on with us today. And but Cheryl, in the meantime, please share. Tell me a little bit more about how you serve your clients. I think we've already had a conversation about helping me build my sales team in 2023.
Yes, we did. Yes.
Mhm.
So I teach from the core of what I teach from literally is a heart-centered framework. You've heard a little bit about it, but what wraps around that? So it's meeting the sales team or the sales focused leader where they are so that I understand where they are. There are some clients that they built their business on referrals. So how can we accelerate on the referral scenario, right? And others are building their businesses from what we call cold calling. They've got to actually go out there and have cold conversations or cold conversations with their warm network to let them know what they're doing. If wherever you are in the process, it's important that any coach or any mentor meets you where you are so they can help you get to those next levels. Other areas that we cover would be we go through the mindset piece just to understand what is your relationship with money, time, and energy, because that is really what sales is money, time, and energy. How much time, energy are you going to invest, right? And those types of things. And then from there, there's a why buyers buy. Buyers buy emotionally. They everything starts with the emotion and then we justify it, right? I'm going to give you a short example. Think about the pair of shoes that are $200 higher than what you normally spend on shoes. And you start going, I was going to quit my gym membership. That's, $50. And you start trying to logic your way through why you should get the shoes. And then some people are just like impulsive, like, I'm buying the shoes, right? So you want to, yeah, right. You want to think about the way you buy and the way you show up for yourself, because that's another thing is sometimes it could be a self-limiting belief. So we touch on that as well, where maybe you've never invested over X thousand dollars. And so, but your program is a 50K program, a $25,000 solution. So if you haven't invested at that level, let's address where your mindset lies regarding the time, money, and energy. And just to go through it, so, why buyers buy, there's defining outcomes and setting up a 90-day plan. From there, it's the heart-centered framework. We do role plays in our group coaching program so that you can understand, you can practice in a safe space, right? Don't practice on your clients, practice in a safe space and get some adjustments that may be needed. And then one thing that I do a little differently is I'm a coach that actually, my programs are limited in space because I actually do a lot of research on what you're doing so that I can speak to you in terms of what you're doing, what your buyers might be looking for, and have a sense of what that competition looks like. So a lot of times when you're in larger groups, that can't happen. And that's why I like to keep the groups a little bit smaller, probably to like 12 to 14 people is probably the max, because then I can actually leverage what I know from a sales perspective for each individual. So that's the core of the program itself.
Yeah, it sounds so informative. I'm so happy that you were able to share. I know you have I think it was a worksheet or
Yeah.
something for the audience. I want to be able to get the link to that. So on the replay, I can share that. Or even if you have it, can you put it in the chat, Cheryl?
You know what I'll do? I'll give it to you now because if they go to my website, and I will put it in the chat, if
Okay.
you go to my website, www.thesalesgrowthcoach.com, the sales growth coach, if you just run these letters together that are next to my name, there will be a space where the pop-up will come up and you can get the ultimate cheat sheet for preparing for business meetings. There are 15 different components to it. I was surprised I could come up with 15. I've since thought of like 5 more, but at the end of the day, it'll give you a solid 15 ways you can prepare for your business meeting.
I love that, Cheryl. Again, I'm so grateful for our time together and all the future conversations that we're going to have. But
Yes.
if you could think of one final best practice to share with the audience, what would that best practice be?
Okay.
You shared a lot.
For me, what has really, really helped me be successful in my 25-year career in sales, and I've sold to Fortune 1000s, is active listening. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a group meeting with 8, 10, 12 people, and one part of the team is trying to explain why something can or can't happen. And I actually hear the motivation behind someone's question. And we break into the motivator behind the question, and it's a completely different conversation. So actively listening without making assumptions, right? So there's a line where we don't want to assume that we know what they're talking about, but really just actively listening, because from there, most of the people here are go-givers to begin with. Like that, to be in healthcare, like literally you have to be a go-giver. I think it's a requirement. So as a go-giver, if you're just listening and you can catch what somebody's motivation is, then you'll be able to just assess and say, it's okay to say we'll come back with the answer. Buyers do usually want the answer on the spot. But if you don't have it, just talk to them about what your thoughts are and that you'd like to get them a final answer, as opposed to, being in the room and trying to kind of jumble your way through it. That doesn't feel comfortable for anyone. To your point, Elle, if the person doesn't sound confident, then it becomes, can they confidently get me to my outcome?
Yes, yes. I appreciate you so much. And that was such great information. I have a page full of notes. So hopefully you took notes also. And then we had, I think it's Barbara. Hey, Barbara, thanks for joining. Thanks, Kim, for joining. Barbara asked, where can she watch the replay? Barbara, I'm going to be posting this to our YouTube channel. So go on to youtube.com and search for the Healthcare Consultant Network, and you'll be able to watch this as many times as you need to confidently show up for your sales conversations. And I know many of you will most likely would like to connect with Cheryl. So Cheryl, would you please share with everyone how they can connect with you? I love LinkedIn, but feel free to share.
Easy, simple, LinkedIn, Cheryl Parks, the sales growth coach. You can find me there, and I'm very responsive there. In addition, website, www.thesalesgrowthcoach.com. You'll be able to schedule any meeting call. I am very open to just discussion. So if you just want to have a conversation and it's like, I don't know if I want to get involved in a program at this point, please feel free to book a meeting and I can talk to you about it. If you're just not sure about the sales perspective, book a meeting. Let's talk about it. I come from go-giver DNA. So yes.
Yes, we as nurses are definitely givers. But in this scenario in business, we want to give, but also we want to be compensated very well for our recommendations and expertise. So Cheryl, I'm grateful for our new friendship. And I hope that everyone here connects with Cheryl. She is amazing at what she does.
Thank you.
But Cheryl, I appreciate you. I hope to see everyone soon. Take care.
Thank you.